It is great to be holding conference in Brighton and Hove, home of our Green MP, Caroline Lucas. There is, we might sometimes forget, only one of her, although through her media appearances, her Hansard record, and her presence around her constituency, not to mention the power of her presence at Balcombe, it might seem as though we've dodged our policy on cloning and created a dozen of her. But there is, of course, only one Caroline Lucas, so I think we should begin conference by giving a round of applause for her great work. We are also, of course, in the home of Britain's first Green Run Council, having made Brighton and Hove a living wage council and cut the ratio between the lowest and highest paid staff to nearly 10-1. In recent months, they've taken further big steps forward. Our Green Council has banned adverts for payday loans on all council-owned billboards and adopted a country-leading ethical investment policy. It's helped attract grant money into the city for improving bus services, £650,000 from the EU to support creative industries, and government funds for ultra-fast broadband. And Brighton and Hove has just seen its best ever GCSE results this year. The marks improving here, while they've gone down in the rest of the country. But running things is never easy, and that task is enormously difficult when coupled with the government's mindless austerity agenda. But we're working very hard to make sure that very soon, in many more towns and cities, we'll be facing exactly the same challenges as we're facing here now in Brighton and Hove. And I know that members of the Association of Green Councillors are working tirelessly to turn more councils green. Let's do it. Now, as Rob alluded to, when I addressed the last Green Party Autumn Conference, I'd been leader of the party for 4 days. And as Zoe Williams of The Guardian enjoys recounting, I wasn't yet acquainted with what some people see as the really important issues of political leadership, like how the colour of your jacket stands out against your backdrop. Hopefully now you can see, however, I've mastered the art of contrast. But 1 year on, I've accumulated what feels like a lifetime of experiences. A moment of pure pleasure was pinning down Nigel Farage on Question Time. The subject was UKIP's tax policy. Now, I really hate to tell Policy Committee this, but it is actually possible to create an entire new tax policy in the space of one very long possibly, but not very advisable. Just waving a pint and a cigarette and grinning does not a serious political party make. One special event from the past year that needs celebrating is the announcement of our newest parliamentary representative. So new that she's yet to even take up her seat. That won't happen until early November, but today we can pay tribute to Jenny Jones, who was elected by you, all of the Green Party members, making her a unique member of the House of Lords. And what makes her even more special is that she's taking that seat with the explicit aim of abolishing the chamber she's sitting in. But of course, being a Green peer is going to have its own special challenges. If anyone knows where to find any fake ermine, Just see Jenny later. In the last 12 months, 3 political issues particularly stand out. I have to begin with the tragic events in Syria. There's one thing that I agree with President Obama about, that the world must not tolerate the gassing of innocent civilians. Indeed, we must not tolerate the gassing of anyone at all. And the world must not tolerate the massacres, the humanitarian crises, or the whole hideous civil war. But where I and we, the Green Party, differ with him is over the idea that unilaterally deciding to throw more high explosive into this situation will do anything to improve it. Far better to first ensure that the world provides every support for humanitarian efforts, both for Syrian refugees and vulnerable civilians. And we must flex every diplomatic muscle, explore every avenue, call on every potential mediator to find a way for the UN to act decisively on the issue. It's not easy. In fact, it's immensely difficult. Russia and China are not easy partners. But the legal way forward under international law is the only way forward. We need to set international relations, the UN, onto the right footing and ensure that President Assad, and probably rebel leaders too, are held to account by the whole international community. The parliamentary vote against the unilateral attack on Syria was a landmark. It draws a line under the dreadful, disastrous decisions on Iraq and Afghanistan. We know the right way forward, the legal way forward, and that's the way we should take in future. Back in Britain, a key political issue of the year has been energy. As we've heard yet more worrying news of leaks and spillages from Fukushima, the government has been frantically hunting to find a firm around the world, any firm, anywhere, that might put cash into a new nuclear power station at Hinkley C. We say no to nuclear power. And then, thinking of Balcombe again, we've seen ministers dancing like overexcited cheerleaders in support of fracking. Have some tax breaks. Here's some bribes for the local community. Let's just cut away local people's right to have a say about their own fields, farms and forests. And yet, we know fracking is absolutely no answer for Britain's energy future. And we've seen the huge failure of the Green Deal, which is clearly a scheme designed for the benefit of the financial industry, not to help hard-pressed householders tackle energy waste. This, while the government doesn't spend a single penny to insulate our leaky, expensive-to-heat homes. This isn't just awful, it's disastrous at a time when the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have passed 400 parts per million and steam on upwards. The organisation Carbon Tracker has worked out we must keep more than half of our known fossil fuel reserves in the ground. The challenge is to work out, how do we do that? We should not be looking for more fossil fuels. The third issue is the most immediately pressing day-to-day issue, the socially devastating impact of the government slashing away at the means of the poorest in our community. There's the bedroom tax, this week rightly criticised by the UN. There's the benefits cap, the cuts to council tax benefit, the end of disability living allowance, no more crisis loans, the plundering of family tax credits. All of this is in a society where there's at least 5 workers chasing every job vacancy, and far more in many areas, where 1 in 5 workers earns less than a living wage, where 1 in 10 are working fewer hours than they want to, where 37% of people have no savings that they could turn to in an emergency, 37%, and where there are more than 13 million people living below the poverty line. Conference, consider this. In the world's 6th largest economy, 1/5 of the population do not have enough money to live on. And this was after the year when the richest 10% of people got 12% richer. We say, as the Green Party, no more. We will fight for an economy that provides jobs that workers can build a life on, and an economy where nobody in Britain goes without. Nobody should go without. Electorally, looking internally for a second, we this year have made great strides towards becoming a truly national party, with our first councillors elected in Cornwall, in Surrey, in Essex, in Kent, and in several councils in the West Midlands. Behind each of those successes is a hard-working team. Well done to you all. But sadly, in government, we still have a tired, creaking Tory Lib Dem coalition that has lost what little credibility it might once have had. A little bit of history. The Conservative Party got its current name back in 1834 with Sir Robert Peel's Tamworth Manifesto, which promised that the party wouldn't institute unnecessary change, that it wouldn't produce, as he put it, a perpetual vortex of agitation. Sir Robert would surely be horrified by today's Conservative Party. It is producing a perpetual vortex of destruction of our institutions and our treasured and much-needed public services. It's a party that's spinning off a stream of profits for its friends, from A4E to Atos to G4S. They're an alphabet soup of discredited privatisers feeding at the public trough. The Conservative Party is handing over our NHS to American multinational companies. The Conservative Party is going where even Margaret Thatcher wouldn't go, in auctioning off the Queen's head, putting Royal Mail into private hands. As the Green Party, we say no. We say privatisation has absolutely failed. Privatisation is not for the common good. It works solely for the benefit of private profits. No more. And then we've got the Lib Dems, who've abandoned their tuition fees policy, abandoned their opposition to nuclear arms and nuclear power, abandoned any principled commitment to justice by supporting secret courts and legal aid cuts, and who now are cravenly supporting a lobbying bill that's designed to gag anyone who dares to remember all of their broken promises. We've seen the Lib Dems silent on the fate of courageous whistleblower Edward Snowden, and we've seen Nick Clegg's spokesman explicitly endorsing the ridiculous but disturbing sight of security officers standing over Guardian journalists as they destroyed evidence at the government's behest. We've seen, astonishingly, the Lib Dem Energy Secretary, Ed Davey, sounding like a teenager getting carried away in the throes of passion on a Friday night. He loves shale gas. The Lib Dems have failed to protect Britain from the Tories. They have been exposed, and their reward will be to become as much history as Sir Robert Peel. But when history looks back on the coalition, what will really stand out is the failure to find a new economic model for Britain. It's clear that the current economic model, globalisation, neoliberalism, privatisation, has failed economically and it's failed environmentally. And yet the government has not provided any way forward to a new kind of economy that we desperately need, an economy that delivers for the common good. It's done nothing to rein in the power of multinationals and give small businesses and cooperatives, local firms with local support, the chance to compete on something like a level playing field. Joe's Takeaway can't arrange to ship its profits through half a dozen subsidiaries in the Cayman Islands, but that giant chain down the road sure does. The government's plan, such as it is to reinflate the housing bubble and to rely on return to rising household debt to fund a consumer-led retail bubble. Today, this very day, estate agents and surveyors are calling on the government to stop the housing bubble. Estate agents and surveyors want the bubble to stop. Has the coalition learnt nothing from the past? We need an economy that operates within the limits of our one planet and ensures that everyone has access to life's essentials. We need a massive change in direction, a change in direction that only the Green Party offers. You'd expect the Labor Party, at this point in the political cycle, to be soaring in the polls. Yet they aren't. And that's not surprising. They are not, sadly, a credible alternative to the coalition. What does Labor stand for? It's perhaps easier to say what they don't stand for. Well, they're not going to rule out fracking. They've said, astonishingly, the Labor Party, they've said they can't promise to abolish the bedroom tax. They won't say that they'll bring the railways back into public ownership. And they're not, it's very, very clear, going to speak up for the rights of immigrants or asylum seekers who should be given refuge as part of our long, proud tradition of helping the persecuted and the vulnerable. The Green Party will stand up for those people. So 20 months out from a general election, what do the Labor Party plan to do if they win? Well, we know, we've been promised nonetheless, that they'll follow Tory spending plans, a policy straight from the mind of Tony Blair. Not only that, they'll tighten the benefits cap. Liam Byrne, Labor's Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, said that the benefits cap was a good idea in principles, but the Tories had messed it up. Why? It didn't cover enough families and did nothing to stop people living a life on welfare. That is the Labor Party. That's right. In the world's sixth richest state, where the government is cutting social security payments and forcing people into ever greater poverty, even though there's too few jobs to go round, where 13 million people, 1 in 5, are living below the poverty line, and where 1.35 million children go to bed hungry, the Labor Party says the benefit cuts aren't deep enough. But there is one alternative to the three virtually indistinguishable neoliberal parties. That alternative is the Green Party. We lead the way in speaking up for the poor and the vulnerable. Green councillors and campaigners have called for councils to pledge not to evict anyone because of the bedroom tax. Our own Greens here in Brighton and Hove were one of the first to make that pledge. Well done. And in the Green Party, we're focusing particularly on tackling food poverty because, shockingly, there are 500,000 people in Britain today dependent on food banks. Here in Brighton and Hove in the last 12 months, the number of food banks has tripled to meet demand. Now, the donors to food banks, who are sometimes people not very far from needing help themselves, are doing the right thing, the humane thing. They are doing what they can to help. And the volunteers running those food banks do a great job. But volunteers and donors are not the answer to decades of policies that have limited people's access to fresh and affordable food. They, the donors and the volunteers, cannot and should not be asked to solve the real problem, which is aching poverty. Volunteering shouldn't be about providing the essentials of life because the government is failing to do so. We, in the Green Party, we promise we won't just fight to make the minimum wage a living wage. We won't just fight to ensure benefits mean everyone can have a decent life. We won't stop fighting until everyone is able to buy and cook fresh food. We'll keep fighting and keep campaigning until the last food bank in Britain is closed because it isn't needed anymore. Another essential of life is healthcare. The National Health Service, our National Health Service, leads the world. Dedicated, skilled, professional doctors, nurses, administrators and carers have worked selflessly and effectively to provide free health care according to need. But the system is being torn to shreds and handed over to a handful of profits at any cost, multinational health companies and dubious local consortiums. In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, there's a contract right now up for grabs, worth up to £800 million, to provide care for older people in the region, including what's called end-of-life care. The short list of bidders was announced this week, and it includes what you'd have to call the usual suspects: Serco, United Health UK, Virgin Healthcare. The Green Party and most people in the UK don't want any of those organisations responsible for healthcare of any kind. And there's something particularly disturbing about the dominance of the profit motive when it comes for caring for our elderly citizens. We in the Green Party are fighting with every ounce of strength against these kind of contracts. The NHS is a national jewel that must be grabbed back from the jewel thieves, polished and set back again in pride of place. The profit motive has no place in the healthcare system, and we will not rest until we've expelled every last corporate bloodsucker from our NHS. Of course, there are many more jewels that we're also going to have to fight for. Caroline Lucas's bill to bring the railways back into public hands, that's winning very wide public support. Conversely, the government's plans to privatise Royal Mail, rightly, are attracting widespread opprobrium. I promise you, that if the government does overcome public resistance to privatising Royal Mail, we will immediately start a campaign to bring it back into public hands. And underpinning all of this, underpinning all of our lives, all of our economic activity, everything in our existence, is our natural world, our beautiful, precious, diverse natural world, on which we're all dependent, in which we all have both the right to enjoy and the responsibility to protect. We needed action yesterday to cut our carbon emissions and tackle climate change. We needed action last year to cut our emissions and tackle climate change. We didn't get it. So this is a message for David Cameron, for Ed Miliband, for Barack Obama, for every world leader, for every corporate CEO, for every person in the world today. We must do far more to ensure that we preserve our world for future generations and for people alive today. Our common good, our common survival depends on it. Now, before I finish speaking and hand over the real business of conference to all of you, it's worth repeating for those who don't know that the Green Party Conference is our supreme decision-making body. We're a democratic body with policy decided by our members. That's a critical part of our structure, an essential way of ensuring that we remain on course as a force for the common good of both people and planet. And we'll be bringing the full force of that democratic power to bear on a critically important date next year, May 22nd, European and Council Election Day. Since 1999, Jean, Caroline, and then Keith have done a magnificent job in Brussels, carrying our flag as part of the fourth largest group in the European Parliament. But on May 22nd next year, we have a real opportunity to significantly add to that power in Brussels. It would only take a swing of 1.6% to see us treble our number of MEPs. A poll just last month by YouGov put us on 12% of the European vote. It's a promising start. But we all know that those seats won't fall into our laps. We've got the policies to deliver well-being for everyone in Britain. We have a distinct, honest, democratic approach to politics. We will build an economy that works for the common good, not for the wealthy few. But we have to make sure that voters across England and Wales know that. We don't take donations from city bankers, multinational corporations, or massively wealthy tax dodgers. Above all, we depend on volunteers. The power of the Green Party comes from people, individuals like each one of you. And I have to say, make this message very clear, thank you for everything that you do. And I say, let's send many more Green MEPs to Brussels. Let's elect many more hard-working local councillors up and down the country. And let's ensure that we re-elect our Green MP in 2015. We work for the nation, its environment, and its people. We work for the common good. We can win and we must win. Let's do it. Thank you.